Have you ever noticed how anxiety can feel constant, even when nothing seems objectively wrong? Life looks fine from the outside. Responsibilities are manageable, relationships appear stable, and yet tension remains. There is a quiet restlessness underneath everything, like a background noise your mind never fully turns off. You wake up already alert, you fall asleep tired, and calm moments feel strangely fragile and temporary. This persistent anxiety is confusing because it does not match your external circumstances or logical explanations. Nothing dramatic is happening, yet your body behaves as if something dangerous is always about to occur. Your thoughts keep scanning the past for mistakes and the future for possible problems without ever stopping. Even during peaceful moments, your mind refuses to fully relax or feel genuinely safe. Many people assume this constant anxiety means something is broken inside them. They believe it is a personal flaw, a weakness, or a sign of emotional failure. But this anxiety is not random, and it is not a defect of your personality. It is the predictable result of mental patterns you repeat daily, often without conscious awareness. Anxiety rarely appears suddenly, and it does not exist independently from how the mind operates. It grows quietly through small internal habits that feel normal, reasonable, and even protective. Over time, these habits train your nervous system to stay activated, vigilant, and tense. Eventually, anxiety becomes the default background state, even when life appears calm. You may notice this when you try to relax, but cannot fully switch off. The moment silence appears, your thoughts immediately fill the space with analysis and concern. Your mind searches for something to fix, something to prepare for, something to control. Peace feels unfamiliar, while tension feels strangely familiar and reliable. This creates a frustrating loop that many people experience but rarely understand clearly. You try to calm yourself, yet anxiety returns without an obvious external trigger. You attempt mindfulness, relaxation, or distraction, but the feeling keeps resurfacing. Eventually, you start wondering why anxiety feels permanent, even during good phases of life. The answer is not that anxiety is stronger than you are. The answer is that anxiety is being quietly fed by internal habits you do not recognize. These habits operate automatically, shaping how you interpret thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations. Without awareness, they reinforce anxiety every single day, even when nothing is wrong externally. Ancient Buddhist psychology describes this mechanism with remarkable precision and clarity. It explains that suffering does not originate from events, but from resistance to reality. Anxiety arises when the mind fights what is happening and clings to what it wants instead. This struggle creates constant tension, regardless of how peaceful the situation appears externally. From this perspective, anxiety is not an enemy to eliminate or suppress aggressively. It is a signal showing where the mind is locked into patterns of resistance and attachment. Anxiety points toward habits that create friction between reality and expectation. Ignoring this signal only strengthens the internal conflict that keeps anxiety alive. In this video, we will explore 7 invisible mental habits that quietly sustain anxiety over time. These habits are not dramatic behaviors, but subtle patterns shaping your internal experience daily. Most people practice them unconsciously, believing they are simply thinking normally. Yet these patterns continuously activate stress responses without delivering actual solutions or safety. Understanding these habits is not about judgment or self-criticism. It is about developing clarity regarding how anxiety is being maintained internally. Clarity creates space, and space allows change to happen naturally and gently. Without awareness, no technique or strategy can produce lasting calm. The goal here is not to eliminate anxiety forever or become emotionally numb. Anxiety is part of being human and will always appear in certain moments. The real shift happens when anxiety no longer dominates your inner world constantly. That shift begins with recognizing the habits that keep anxiety alive beneath the surface. Many people chase calm through control, distraction, or forced positivity. Yet calm cannot exist where the mind is locked into unconscious resistance patterns. Peace is not created by fighting anxiety, but by understanding its roots clearly. That understanding is what begins to loosen anxiety's grip, gradually and sustainably. As we move forward, notice what resonates rather than trying to fix yourself immediately. If anxiety feels familiar in these descriptions, that awareness already matters deeply. This is not about becoming someone new, but about seeing yourself more honestly. The first step toward calm is not action, but recognition. We will uncover the first mental habit that quietly fuels anxiety every day. It is extremely common, socially accepted, and often mistaken for problem solving. Yet this habit keeps the mind trapped in tension, never fully present or at ease. Once you recognize it, anxiety begins to lose one of its strongest supports. This habit is mental rumination, the endless replaying of thoughts without resolution or relief. Rumination happens when the mind circles the same ideas repeatedly, like a scratched record. Past mistakes resurface with painful clarity. Future scenarios are analyzed with growing fear. The mind jumps between regret and anticipation, never landing fully in the present moment. This pattern feels useful because it mimics problem solving, but it solves absolutely nothing. Instead of creating clarity, it deepens confusion and keeps the body in constant alert mode. An anxious mind believes thinking more will finally produce certainty or safety. Buddhist teachings described this state long ago using the metaphor of the monkey mind. The untrained mind behaves like a restless monkey, leaping endlessly between branches of thought. One moment it grabs a memory, the next it clings to a hypothetical future danger. This restless movement creates internal chaos rather than insight or meaningful solutions. Energy is consumed rapidly, while the mind remains unsatisfied and unsettled. Anxiety thrives here because the nervous system never receives a signal of safety or completion. A mind stuck in rumination is never truly present. It exists in imagined pasts and futures that cannot be changed or controlled. Meanwhile, the body reacts as if these imagined scenarios are happening right now. This is why anxiety feels physical, even when nothing dangerous is actually occurring. The heart races, muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, and rest feels unreachable. The mind has convinced the body that constant vigilance is necessary for survival. Many people try to stop rumination by force, demanding silence from their thoughts. Unfortunately, this approach often backfires and intensifies mental noise even further. Trying to control thoughts aggressively only creates additional resistance and frustration. Buddhist practice offers a radically different and surprisingly effective approach. Instead of fighting the mind, you gently redirect its attention toward a stable anchor. That anchor is not a concept, belief, or affirmation, but a physical experience. The breath becomes the simplest and most accessible anchor for awareness. Breathing happens naturally, continuously, and always in the present moment. When attention rests on the breath, the mind has less space to spiral endlessly. This does not mean thoughts disappear or suddenly behave perfectly. Distraction will happen repeatedly, and that is completely normal and expected. The practice is not perfection, but gentle repetition without self-judgment. Each time you notice the mind wandering, awareness has already returned. That moment of noticing is not failure, but the exact point where change begins. With patience, attention is brought back to the breath, again and again. Over time, this repeated redirection trains the nervous system to settle naturally. The mind learns that it does not need to chase every thought for safety. Presence slowly becomes more familiar than constant mental movement. This process does not eliminate anxiety instantly or permanently. What it does is weaken anxiety's dependence on constant rumination. Without endless mental replay, anxiety loses one of its primary fuel sources. Importantly, this shift happens gradually and almost quietly. There is no dramatic breakthrough moment or sudden emotional release. Instead, calm starts appearing in small, unexpected gaps between thoughts. These gaps feel subtle at first, but they change the internal landscape profoundly. Moments of neutrality appear where anxiety once dominated automatically. The mind begins to rest in what is happening, rather than what might happen. Understanding rumination is crucial because it often operates unnoticed for years. People believe they are thinking responsibly while unknowingly feeding chronic anxiety. Recognizing this habit is already a powerful interruption of the cycle. Once rumination becomes visible, it is no longer fully in control. Awareness creates distance, and distance creates choice where none existed before. This is how anxiety slowly loses its constant grip on the mind. In the next chapter, we will explore another deeply ingrained habit. This one hides behind responsibility, planning, and the desire for certainty. It feels protective, yet it quietly traps the mind in permanent tension. Another powerful habit feeding anxiety hides behind something society deeply rewards: control. Wanting control looks responsible, mature, and even intelligent from the outside. Planning ahead, anticipating risks, and managing outcomes are often praised as strengths. Yet beneath this behavior lies a subtle psychological trap that keeps anxiety constantly active. The mind begins believing that safety comes from predicting and controlling every variable. When control becomes a necessity rather than a tool, tension becomes permanent. Anxiety thrives in this mindset because the world is inherently unpredictable. No amount of planning can guarantee outcomes in relationships, health, or the future. Trying to eliminate uncertainty creates a losing battle against reality itself. Buddhist psychology explains this clearly through the concept of attachment. Suffering arises not from events, but from clinging to how we want things to be. The tighter the grip, the more painful the inevitable loss of control feels. Living this way turns the mind into a constant threat detection system. Attention is always scanning for what might go wrong next. The nervous system never receives permission to fully relax or power down. Even neutral situations start feeling dangerous under this internal pressure. Waiting for a message becomes stressful. Silence feels threatening. Delays feel catastrophic. The body reacts as if survival depends on constant vigilance. This habit often develops early in life during emotionally unpredictable environments. When safety felt inconsistent, control became a way to create internal stability. Over time, control turned from a strategy into an identity. People begin believing they must manage everything to feel okay. Letting go feels irresponsible, dangerous, or even morally wrong. Rest becomes uncomfortable because alertness feels safer than stillness. The illusion at the core of this habit is subtle but powerful. Control feels like protection, yet it actually maintains chronic anxiety. The effort itself becomes the source of exhaustion and tension. Buddhist practice does not suggest chaos or passivity as alternatives. Instead, it teaches discernment between influence and inevitability. Wisdom lies in recognizing what can be shaped and what must be accepted. This distinction changes how the nervous system responds to uncertainty. When effort is applied selectively, tension naturally decreases. Energy is conserved rather than wasted on impossible tasks. Small daily examples make this concept tangible and practical. Traffic delays cannot be controlled, but reactions to them can. Other people's emotions remain unpredictable, but personal boundaries remain possible. Waiting for outcomes becomes less painful when time is no longer treated as a threat. Control over attention replaces control over events. Presence replaces anticipation as the primary mode of awareness. This shift is uncomfortable at first because it challenges deeply held beliefs. Letting go feels like giving up safety rather than gaining peace. The mind resists because control once served a protective function. However, something important happens when control loosens slightly. The body begins receiving signals that constant alertness is unnecessary. Breathing deepens, muscles soften, and internal pressure slowly decreases. Anxiety weakens not because life becomes predictable, but because resistance decreases. Reality no longer feels like an opponent requiring constant management. Experience is allowed to unfold without immediate correction or interference. Trust begins developing, not in outcomes, but in personal resilience. Confidence shifts from controlling life to navigating it with flexibility. This internal trust becomes a powerful stabilizing force. Understanding this habit is crucial because it hides behind socially approved behavior. Many people live anxiously while believing they are simply being responsible adults. Recognition reveals how much effort is being wasted on illusionary security. When the need for control is questioned, anxiety loses another major source of fuel. Space appears where tension once dominated automatically. Calm becomes possible without needing perfect circumstances. In the next chapter, we will explore a habit even more intimate and damaging. It speaks in your own voice and judges you relentlessly. This internal relationship often determines how safe you feel anywhere in life. Few sources of anxiety are as persistent and intimate as the voice inside your own head. This voice does not raise its tone, yet it never truly leaves you alone. It evaluates, comments, corrects, and questions almost every internal movement. You notice it after mistakes, but also during success and even moments of rest. It asks whether you are doing enough, being enough, or becoming enough. This voice often feels logical, protective, even motivating at first glance. In reality, it functions as a constant internal surveillance system. Nothing you do fully escapes its evaluation. The body reacts to this pressure as if danger is always nearby. Anxiety feeds on this relationship because judgment signals threat. Every critical thought activates the nervous system's defensive response. The body prepares for rejection, failure, or exclusion, even when none exists. Many people assume this inner judge helps them improve or stay disciplined. What it actually creates is chronic tension and emotional insecurity. Growth becomes driven by fear rather than curiosity or self-trust. This habit usually forms early, often without conscious awareness. When approval felt conditional, self-judgment became a survival strategy. Criticizing yourself felt safer than being criticized by others. Over time, this voice becomes internalized and automatic. You no longer question its authority or accuracy. Its tone feels like truth rather than interpretation. Buddhist psychology views this inner judge as a misunderstanding of identity. Thoughts are mistaken for facts, and evaluations are mistaken for reality. The mind becomes both prosecutor and defendant simultaneously. Living this way keeps anxiety permanently active. There is no safe internal space to rest or recover. Even solitude feels tense because the judge never leaves. The most damaging aspect of this habit is isolation. You feel alone even in company because you are never unobserved. Connection becomes difficult when self-acceptance feels unsafe. Compassion, in this context, is not softness or indulgence. It is a radical shift in how the nervous system experiences safety. Treating yourself kindly signals that internal threat has ended. Buddhist teachings describe compassion as wisdom applied inward. Suffering is acknowledged without adding punishment to pain. Mistakes are met with understanding rather than attack. This does not remove responsibility or accountability. It removes hostility from the learning process. Growth becomes possible without fear as the primary motivator. Practicing self-compassion interrupts the anxiety loop directly. Judgment creates tension. Tension fuels anxiety. Anxiety increases mistakes. Kindness breaks this cycle by restoring internal safety. Simple gestures can initiate this shift powerfully. Placing a hand on the chest signals grounding and presence. Speaking gently to yourself changes the body's physiological response. Phrases acknowledging difficulty activate soothing neural pathways. The nervous system responds as if support is present. Anxiety begins losing its authority over your internal experience. This habit is challenging to change because it feels like identity. Many people fear losing standards or becoming complacent. In truth, compassion increases resilience rather than reducing discipline. When the inner judge softens, anxiety no longer controls motivation. You act from clarity instead of fear. Effort becomes sustainable rather than exhausting. Understanding this habit reveals how anxiety becomes self-generated. The threat is no longer external, but internalized. Safety returns when the internal relationship changes. In the next chapter, we will examine another deeply rooted misunderstanding. It involves how you relate to your own thoughts entirely. This habit quietly convinces you that every anxious thought is reality itself. Anxiety becomes overwhelming when thoughts stop being experiences and start feeling like identity. When an anxious thought arises, it does not feel optional or temporary. It feels authoritative, urgent, and personally threatening. The mind treats it as information about reality rather than mental activity. The nervous system cannot relax while believing every thought is a signal. Uncertainty becomes danger instead of possibility. Anxious thinking convinces you otherwise. It tells you the thought is accurate because it feels intense. It tells you it matters because it feels personal. The body responds accordingly. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow. The system prepares for impact, even when no external threat exists. This habit forms quietly and early. When emotional safety was inconsistent, the mind learned hypervigilance. Thoughts became tools for predicting danger and preventing pain. Over time, thinking replaced presence. Instead of experiencing the moment, you analyzed it. Instead of feeling emotions, you interpreted them. Anxiety thrives in this environment because interpretation never ends. There is always another scenario, outcome, or meaning to consider. The mind never settles because it believes settling equals risk. This is why reassurance rarely works long-term. A new thought quickly replaces the previous one. Certainty becomes a moving target that never arrives. Freedom does not come from eliminating thoughts. That goal only increases frustration and self-judgment. Freedom comes from changing the relationship to thinking itself. Observing thoughts instead of identifying with them creates space. That space interrupts anxiety's authority immediately. The thought loses power without resistance or belief. Simple labeling helps establish this distance. This is a fear thought. This is anticipation. This is catastrophizing. Labeling is not denial. It is recognition. It reminds you that awareness is larger than content. Another effective image is the river metaphor. Thoughts flow like leaves on moving water. You remain on the bank, watching without chasing. Initially, the urge to engage feels strong. The mind fears losing control or missing something important. With practice, this urgency softens naturally. As distance increases, anxiety loses momentum. The nervous system receives fewer threat signals. Calm becomes accessible without effort. This shift does not eliminate difficult thoughts. It changes how long they stay and how deeply they affect you. Anxiety becomes a passing experience rather than a permanent state. Another crucial misunderstanding involves resistance. When anxious sensations appear, the instinct is to fight them. This resistance amplifies the very experience you want gone. Fighting anxiety signals danger to the nervous system. Acceptance signals safety. The body responds differently to each message. Allowing sensations does not mean liking them. It means stopping the internal war. Energy previously used for resistance becomes available for regulation. Curiosity replaces fear when resistance drops. You notice sensations without labeling them as problems. Intensity often decreases naturally when allowed. This approach feels counterintuitive at first. Many fear anxiety will grow if not controlled. In reality, resistance is what sustains it. When you stop feeding anxiety with struggle, it changes form. It becomes information rather than threat. The system recalibrates without force. At this stage, awareness becomes the foundation of change. You notice habits forming before they fully activate. Choice appears where reaction once dominated. Mindfulness is not passive observation. It is active recognition of what is happening now. Presence interrupts automatic patterns consistently. Daily moments become training opportunities. Walking, breathing, waiting, listening. Each moment strengthens awareness when noticed intentionally. Anxiety thrives on unconscious repetition. Awareness disrupts that repetition gently but effectively. Nothing dramatic is required for meaningful change. Understanding these habits reframes anxiety completely. It is not an enemy or defect. It is feedback from a system seeking safety. The goal is not a life without anxiety. The goal is a life where anxiety no longer dominates. Presence becomes stronger than habit. And that is where real freedom begins. Not by eliminating waves, but learning how to surf them calmly. If you found this video helpful, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for being here, truly. Cheers.